This is an audio sample of Overcoming the Emotional Pain of Incest by Brenda Dewis from the Courageous Overcomers anthology. The missing pieces of my shattered life came together when I was 26. I was at a function and met a young man and decided I would go with him to the movies. We hit it off quite well, and the evening looked promising until my aunt told us that we had to cancel the outing. The reason, she claimed, was that the young man was my father's son, my brother. The news took me for a loop. My brother? I knew I had two younger brothers, but the young man standing before me was not one of them. She explained that his father was my father, and the man I grew up thinking was my father was not. I was confused but somewhat relieved. You see, the man I had grown up calling Daddy was the father to my two younger brothers. The story was more convoluted than I wanted to know at the time. My biological father was related to the family who brought my mother from Haiti. He took advantage of her, and she became pregnant with me. Mummy never spoke of it, and even when I asked her, being a woman of very few words, she merely said that my aunt talked too much. Then who was my daddy? Well, things began to make a little more sense to me. So, the man I called Daddy was not my father. Was that why he could sexually abuse me for so long? A part of me was relieved that we were not related, but how could a grown man be so cold-hearted in taking advantage of an innocent child? I did some backtracking in my mind. I didn't have to think too deeply. I was washing the dishes one evening when the man I had come to know as Daddy approached me and told me that since my mother was not giving it to him, I would have to. I was 12 years old, tall and developing physically, but not wise to sex as my mother had not spoken to me about the facts of life. If I wasn't sure what he was saying then, I found out later that night after he had his usual round of drinks. Before this transpired, I thought I lived a normal life as a child. We weren't wealthy, but my parents insured my siblings and I were well cared for. The first home I recall living in was off Wolf Road. When I was 7 years old, we moved to a southern subdivision. Mummy was a hardworking lady who often held down 2 jobs, and on occasion, her day job extended into the night as she was a housekeeper and a cook. There were times Mummy traveled with the families she worked for, which sometimes meant I had to sleep at my aunt's house. I didn't understand why at the time, but as my thoughts settled, the pieces of my life came together. Mummy's life was not easy, but she was not a complainer. She was a soft-spoken but firm individual who laid down the law with her children. It wasn't until I was older that I learned a little about my mother's past. She was born and raised in Haiti at a time when Haiti was the place where Bahamians in the southern Bahamas frequented for shopping, visits to the doctor, and, like many in the region, holidays. She was from Port-de-Paix, a more developed part of the country. For some, it was more economical to travel to Haiti than to the capital city of Nassau. Haiti was a bustling country that was more advanced in many ways than many of the outer islands of the Bahamas. On such a visit, a family who frequented Haiti on business spoke with my mother's family, offering to bring her to the Bahamas to enroll in school, despite Haiti's vast educational system at the time. They promised that they would ensure her return to them on holidays. It was an opportunity the family embraced. Mummy said her goodbyes and made her way to Nassau. As promised, she was enrolled in school. However, for some reason unknown to me, she was never allowed to return to Haiti. That's when the man I grew up calling uncle forced himself on Mummy when she was 19, and I was born. I don't know if the way I was conceived affected our relationship, but I did realize early that it was strained. There were no arguments, just little communication. Despite this, I knew Mummy loved me, and her way of communicating was to provide for me. My unwelcomed visitor. The night Daddy said he was coming to my room, he remained true to his word. His plan, however, was foiled by Mummy. I had confided in her what he had said earlier, so when she checked on me that night, her husband was fumbling by my bedside with the excuse that he was checking on me, just fixing my bed. She calmly asked him not to, and the next day, Mummy bought me a night latch for my bedroom door. The night latch was a small challenge for Daddy. He was a carpenter by trade, and even though I had latched the door, he was able to make his way into the room, possibly with the knife he often carried as he approached my bed. Once inside, he would relatch it, so Mummy thought I was asleep. Daddy told me I was helping Mummy out since she wasn't having sex with him, but he wanted it to be our secret. She would have been angry if she had found out, but he claimed it was for her good. For the next 2 years, Daddy sneaked into my bedroom, latched the door behind him, and told me to lay on the floor. I didn't like what he was doing to me. I didn't want him to touch me the way he did night after night. I was confused, and it was painful just as he said it would be, yet he continued despite the obvious pain and trauma it was causing. Sometimes he stayed through the night, wanting to repeat his assault on my young, tired, and now sore body. I couldn't understand why my father would do such a thing, but I began to think it was normal because I was not told otherwise. I began to think all girls had to go through this. I started to hate being a girl. I wanted to be a boy so that no one would abuse me. I didn't realize it at the time, but that was a plan of the enemy to push me towards same-sex attraction. The violation had opened the door for me to entertain the thought, and after a superficial encounter, it didn't feel right. I realized it was not the thing to do. During the day, he was a normal father, although he was aggressive with Mummy, which often ended with her being physically beaten. We had family nights on Fridays and went to the drive-in theater, and on Saturdays, we went out for treats. No one would have suspected that he was a beast at night with the child who called him Daddy. I was fearful, but fear had become my norm. I had nobody to speak to about what was happening to me. I wondered if I didn't do what he said, if he would beat me the way he beat my mother. I didn't want to find out, so I did not resist or speak to my mother on the subject again. A part of me, though, believed that she knew what was going on. How or why did it stop? The sexual abuse triggered anger, making me want to lash out at men. Then I became promiscuous. Not to enjoy sexual encounters. In my young mind, I thought I was paying the young men back for what had happened to me. I wanted them to feel the pain inflicted upon me by another man. It didn't take long to discover that my plan was not working. The only one being hurt in the charade was me. I had allowed myself to become bitter, and it was affecting me more than anyone else. To this point, my mother had never spoken to me about birth control or my period until I told her that I thought I had missed my period. This has been an audio sample from Courageous Overcomers Anthology. For more information on how you can secure your copy of this book, visit booksbybethel.com/courageous-overcomers.